Over the years, BetterHelp has treated millions of people, but what those people don't know about is the dark side of their business. Between their CEO lying about sharing sensitive health information to advertisers, overworking therapists, patients receiving horrible treatment, and more, it seems like BetterHelp is prioritizing profits over the people they help. From its innocent start to the many unethical things they've done, the story of BetterHelp is one worth talking about. So what exactly have they done, and how are they getting away with it? To answer that, we need to know why BetterHelp was created in the first place. Their two founders, Alan Matas and Danny Bragonier, had good intentions from the start when they created BetterHelp in 2013. At the time, Alan was struggling with finding professional counseling services that fit his schedule, so with Danny's help, he created BetterHelp with the mission of making mental health care more accessible. The idea for the company was simple. BetterHelp would serve as the middleman that connected licensed therapists and people who wanted treatment. The therapists would be treated as independent contractors, and customers, for under $40 a week, could text, call, or video chat with these therapists at any time and anywhere. Alan and Danny's first few years in business were great. In 2015, a company called telehealth acquired them for $17.2 million, and by 2018, revenue reached $60 million. It seemed like everything was going perfectly, but in February of 2020, BetterHelp ran into its first of many controversies. While Alan and Danny were focused on scaling their business and pleasing investors, a news website called Jezebel was focused on another thing: finding the truth about BetterHelp. More specifically, they wanted to see whether the company was collecting health data on its users, and if they were, where that data was going. Now, Alan had gone on record previously saying that BetterHelp didn't sell data to third parties or misuse the data in any way. But was that actually true? To find out, Jezebel set up an account on the BetterHelp app, but with the addition of their own software that was able to collect, analyze, and eavesdrop on data sent from the BetterHelp app to its various servers. While setting up their account, everything seemed normal. The app took them through an intake process, something that helps the company find the right therapist for its customers. It asked questions about gender, age, and sexual orientation, along with more specific areas of concern, like the last time a person had suicidal thoughts or if they'd ever been to therapy before. However, after the survey was complete, Jezebel noticed something interesting with their software, something that was pretty shocking. The software detected that BetterHelp was collecting all of this personal information, and even worse, it was being shared with third parties like Facebook, Google, Snapchat, and Pinterest. Based on what Jezebel saw, the social media companies were being signaled by BetterHelp that the account Jezebel signed up with was interested in therapy, and the platform was sending them all the information they collected from the survey. Stuff like their location, what device they were using, how old they were, their religious and financial status, and sexual orientation were all being shared. And more personal mental health questions as well, like how long it had been since they'd been in therapy and when they had last planned to kill themselves. So obviously hearing that does not sound good at all for BetterHelp, right? This is pretty sensitive stuff they're sharing with these social media companies. But what exactly were they doing with this data? Well, in true social media fashion, they were trying to find out everything they could about Jezebel's profile. For instance, Facebook was using the data to get alerted every time a person opened the app, essentially signaling to them how often someone was going to a session and when they booked their appointments. And during said session, Jezebel found that metadata from every message they sent, though not its contents, was also sent to Facebook, meaning that the company knew what time of day they were going to therapy, their approximate location, and how long they were chatting on the app. Now, on one hand, this is how the internet works, right? Like, I can confidently say that every website or app you use is tracking you somehow. But in BetterHelp's case, it just feels different. Of all the information the average internet user shares with tech companies, health data, and especially mental health data, is some of the most controversial. As Jezebel notes, a company automatically telling Snapchat and Pinterest you're signing up for therapy feels pretty spooky, even if it's covered in the fine print. It also brings up questions about how a person's intimate, supposedly private sessions might be exploited by advertisers, an industry that isn't exactly known for operating in good faith. And they have a point here. Yes, BetterHelp doesn't sell data to advertisers, but they're more than happy to give it away for free and get better targeted ads in return. It just feels more nefarious to sort of game these people, who could be at the lowest point in their lives, and collect info on them to figure out how depressed or anxious they are. And even worse, doing it without their affirmative, expressive consent. But the bottom line is that Alan lied about sharing his customers' health data. He said they didn't sell it, but they still gave it out to third parties. So you would think this is the part of the story where some governing body would step in and hold BetterHelp accountable for lying, but I think you know what actually happened. Nothing. The answer is nothing. Despite what was revealed in Jezebel's lengthy investigation, BetterHelp didn't receive any heat from anywhere and continued on as usual. And even better for them, a certain disease would skyrocket the demand for their service. With in-person therapy being paused amid the pandemic, telehealth companies like BetterHelp became the go-to place for people to get mental health treatment. And there were a lot of people who needed it. Nearly half of Americans said the pandemic was having a negative effect on their mental health, and BetterHelp was more than happy to take them in. This influx in users aided BetterHelp in earning $345 and then $720 million in revenue in the following 2 years, while also reaching 2.5 million total users. At this point, BetterHelp had beaten multiple controversies, became a multi-million dollar business, and helped hundreds of thousands of people. But the thing is, not all of those people thought BetterHelp actually helped. And according to their horror stories, the platform might have actually made things worse for them. It was in 2022 that many previous BetterHelp users started to come clean about their experiences on the platform. Most of this backlash was happening on TikTok, where many people were more than happy to finally talk about their nightmare stories. Some of them were about how late their therapists were.
So my first therapist was 10 minutes late to our 10-minute meeting, our first initial meeting. So I told her about something, and it was like something traumatic for me. And she focused so much on the other people's pronouns and sexuality that like the story didn't even matter at this point. And then she kept trying to sell me her book. So I contacted them and I got a different therapist. He was also late and just completely missed our first meeting. We set a second one, he missed that one. And then he just texted like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry, I was at my other job." And I was just like, what?
Others talked about the lack of privacy in their sessions.
As I log onto the video, she's talking to someone and then just stops talking. It's like, "Hey, how are you? So let's get started." I'm like, someone is in there. Like about halfway through the meeting, she gets up, walks out an open door, meaning there was no privacy, goes into the lounge of like the office, makes popcorn while I'm talking, sits down and is eating popcorn with her mouth full, just chewing.
And some discussed how their therapist disregarded their problems altogether.
I was set up with this woman in America and they said that she was like an eating disorder specialist, and I thought, oh great, okay, someone who'll actually get it. I started explaining to her like my symptoms, my thoughts, and how awful my life was because of it. She said something to me like, "Oh, is your BMI really that low that you're experiencing all these things?" And I thought, right. I didn't tell her where my weight was at. It could have been anywhere on the BMI scale, but from what she had said earlier, she was assuming that it was like super low. Anyway, what she said to me there was, "Well, good for you. Congratulations on all that weight loss."
And even beyond TikTok, people continued to talk about what they had gone through after using BetterHelp. Like this Reddit user who said their therapist called them a narcissist, and Caleb Hill, a 22-year-old gay man who sought help after his conservative parents kicked him out of his house. According to Caleb, his BetterHelp therapist advice wasn't particularly helpful. He said either you sacrifice your family or you sacrifice being gay. Now, it would be unfair to lump every single BetterHelp therapist into this narrative that they're all terrible, because that's just not true. There are tens of thousands of therapists that work at BetterHelp, so statistically, there will be bad ones. But I think it's worth looking into how these therapists are treated, because like how patients came out with their stories, BetterHelp therapists had stories of their own. Many of them experienced being overworked, underpaid, and unable to help patients to the best of their ability. For example, one of them came out on Reddit explaining how, when it came to texting clients, BetterHelp had a word limit for responding to them. She was advised to write only up to 2 times the words their patient said. So if the patient wrote something like, "I feel like giving up," she would only have 10 words to respond to it. If she went over the 2 times limit at any time or wrote back 2 times less than what their patient sent them, she wouldn't get paid, which limited her ability to give advice. Beyond that, multiple therapists, including a woman named Alice Bentley, vocalized their frustration with how many clients BetterHelp dumped on them. In Alice's case, she was given up to 55 clients to work with, when a typical full-time caseload for an offline therapist in a private practice is usually around 25 to 30. And even worse, if Alice wanted fewer clients, she might have not been able to make that happen. That's because other therapists said that BetterHelp was sending them new clients, even after they had indicated their practices were already full. But hey, at least for all of the overtime work these therapists were putting in, they were getting paid great. right? Well, not exactly. As I mentioned, BetterHelp uses an opaque formula for paying their therapists that involves converting words of text and minutes of live interaction into dollars. When one therapist named Albert Thrower tracked his work to see his hourly wage, he usually sat in the low 20s, which is below average for the industry. And Alice, who worked constantly even on Christmas Day, made only $1,900 in her highest earning month. Now, despite these cases, BetterHelp claims that you can make up to $8,500 a month on their platform, but that doesn't detract from the reality that Albert, Alice, and many more therapists face. And not just payment-wise. Between everything we've talked about so far, the health data, the therapist stories, and the patient stories, the reality is that BetterHelp hasn't faced any accountability for the sketchy actions they've done up to this point. But someone wanted to change that, and that someone would be the FTC. In July 2023, the organization fully exposed all of the ethical violations that BetterHelp was taking part in, mainly surrounding their mistreatment of users' mental health information. They detailed how BetterHelp pushed consumers into handing over their health information by repeatedly showing them privacy misrepresentations. Furthermore, the FTC explained that despite BetterHelp promising consumers it would not use their personal health data, the company used and revealed millions of consumers' email addresses, IP addresses, and health questionnaire information to Facebook, Snapchat, Google, and more for advertising purposes. This helped the company bring in tens of thousands of new paying users and millions of dollars in revenue, all while failing to obtain consumers' affirmative expressive consent before disclosing their sensitive data. But the most satisfying part of all of this, the FTC confirmed that Jezebel was right in their investigation and undoubtedly proved that Allen misled the public by falsely denying news reports that revealed consumers' personal information. It was clear, BetterHelp betrayed consumers for profit, and the FTC made them pay. $7.8 million to be exact, money that was going straight to BetterHelp consumers. And along with the fee, the FTC banned BetterHelp from sharing consumers' sensitive mental health data for advertising and ordered them to drastically change their rules for data collection. So justice was served. BetterHelp got caught red-handed and had to pay for it. But did that even matter? I mean, BetterHelp is still growing, despite being exposed for everything they've done, and they still have pretty good reviews overall. So what exactly is the problem with everything we've talked about? Well, I think it's just the idea of BetterHelp and what they're trying to be versus what actually works for treating mental health issues. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no expert on the topic, and BetterHelp is nice because it drastically expands the reach for mental health services. However, the platform will never be able to replace in-person therapy, which, according to research, are the treatments that work the best. Which is unfortunate in a way, because in-person therapy isn't scalable, at least to the point where BetterHelp is today. And BetterHelp only got to where it is today by commercializing mental health care, where profits and pleasing investors are above everything else, which obviously leads to ethical issues. I think clinical psychologist Dr. Ali Mattu puts it best.
I don't think we want to run mental health the same way we run Uber. I don't think we should be scaling things and commercializing things in this way. Some things don't really work well in a capitalist system. And I think healthcare is one of those things.